At the outset, I said we have to work on improving the quality of life for New Yorkers. But you can't really talk about improving someone's quality of life when they're struggling with the cost of living. Inflation soaring, prices going up on everything that families need to buy for their kids, diapers, formula, sneakers. And on top of that, how do you pay the monthly rent or the mortgage? It's just so overwhelming for our families. So we'll talk now about everyone's largest expense, housing. And I think about my own family story. My family started married life in a trailer park. On my dad's salary, they eventually moved to an upstairs flat, tiny, but held a few of their kids. They had a few more kids. And they eventually moved to a tiny Cape Cod. But as we grew older, my dad changed jobs. I watched my parents' success unfold to the progression of homes they could afford. And they also knew how important housing was. They raised us to fight for change. My parents were activists back in the 60s, a lot of marches, a lot of protests. And they volunteered for an organization called Housing Opportunities Made Equal, which had just started back then. And I assure you that where I lived, it was a very controversial thing to do. But my parents said everybody has the right to live where they want. And they understood for a society to reach its full potential, equal access to housing is a must. Because when there's not sufficient housing, people at all income levels struggle. And if things get bad, they leave. They search for opportunities elsewhere. Over the last decade, New York State has created 1.2 million jobs. That's great. But only built 400,000 houses. Many forces led to this state of affairs, but front and center are local land use policies that are the most restrictive in the nation. Through zoning, and local communities are able to hold enormous power to block growth. Between full bans on multifamily housing and onerous zoning and approval processes, they make it difficult, almost impossible, to build new homes. Think about that. People want to live here. They have jobs here. Because of local decisions to limit growth, they cannot. Local governments can and should make a difference. I spent 14 years in local government. Many of you came through that route as well. And our community had a citizen-driven master plan that allowed for targeted housing and economic growth while preserving green space. So I know this can be done, but it hasn't been. Between 2010 and 2018, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Putnam counties each granted fewer housing permits per capita than virtually all the suburban counties in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Southern California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Northern Virginia. When it comes to New York City, other metro areas are creating housing at 2 to 4 times the rate that we are. Boston rate is almost double. Washington, D.C., triple. Seattle, 4 times. So with less supply, demand drives up prices, and who gets squeezed? Young families starting out, middle-income families looking to move up, low-income families. People can't even get the starter home anymore. That's why, since becoming governor, housing has been front and center of my agenda. The budget that we worked on together, we passed it. A 5-year, $25 billion plan to create and build 100,000 affordable homes. It's the single largest housing investment in our state's history. We unlocked billions for NYCHA through the creation of the New York City Public Housing Preservation Trust. We created a $25 million eviction prevention legal services program to keep people in their homes and making sure vulnerable renters had the representation they needed in court. We invested $539 million in the Homeowner Assistance Fund. We made $100 million in rent supplements available. So we've done all this together. I want to thank Leader Andre Stewart-Cousins and Speaker Carl Heastie for also prioritizing housing. They know how important this is. They rightly recognize that too many people are struggling just to find a place to call home. And they're looking to us for bold leadership. Decisive action is called for now. Today, I'm proud to introduce the New York Housing Compact, a groundbreaking strategy to catalyze housing development we need for our communities to thrive, for our economy to grow, and our state to prosper. The compact pulls together a broad menu of policy changes that will collectively achieve the ambitious goal of 800,000 new homes built over the next decade. The compact sets clear expectations for the growth we need, while at the same time giving localities the tools, the flexibility, and the resources to stimulate that growth. Every single locality across the state will have a target for building new homes. Upstate, the target is for the current housing stock to grow 1% every 3 years. Believe me, it's very manageable. Downstate, 3% every 3 years. Many localities are already hitting these goals. But many others are just falling a little bit short. And for our small towns and villages, just literally a handful of new homes will help us hit our statewide target. But the reality is, there are some communities that need to effect real change to build the homes we need. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Local governments can meet these targets any way they want. They can shape building capacity. They can redevelop old malls, old buildings, office parks, incentivize new housing production, or just update the zoning rules to reduce the barriers. We know this is a big ask, and that's why localities will get help from the state. To accomplish this, we have to get it done. We will offer substantial new funding for infrastructure, for schools, roads, sewers, all needed to support growing communities. And we'll cut the red tape to allow projects to move more quickly while still protecting the health, safety, and environment of our communities. But when communities have not made good faith efforts to grow, when proposed housing projects are languishing for no legitimate reason, the state will implement a fast-track approval process, because doing nothing is an abdication of our responsibility to act in times of crisis. The Housing Compact is also laser-focused on transit-oriented development. Now, we all know the MTA is the lifeblood of the New York City metropolitan region, and we'll continue to invest and ensure the MTA's long-term fiscal health. We have to do that. And our investments in our world-class commuter lines have connected more people to jobs and created vibrant downtowns. And that's why it makes so much sense to build new housing in those same areas. That's what happens in cities across the globe. So as part of my compact, any municipality with a train station will rezone the area within a half a mile to allow for the creation of new housing within the next 3 years. Finally, we cannot meet the demand for housing without an incentive program like we have with 421A in New York City. Without it, developers are only building condominiums or build elsewhere, which is absolutely not the result we need to meet our housing goals. We will work with the legislature to come up with a replacement for this critical piece of the puzzle. We have to. Overall, this plan is ambitious, but that's what New Yorkers expect from their leaders. Today I say no more delay, no more waiting for someone else to fix this problem. Housing is a human right, and ensuring enough housing is built is how we protect that right. The saying is, never let a good crisis go to waste, and we will not waste this opportunity. We just need everyone and every community to do their part so people who want to live here can, and they can